Taming the High Cost of College, episode 114.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Eric Liguori. He is an entrepreneur expert. He teaches entrepreneurship at the University of Tampa, and he also wrote a great book on entrepreneurship and the student called The Startup Student. And we have a lot of great information. If your student is considering entrepreneurship or is just an entrepreneurial type student, I think this is a great episode and you'll learn a ton about how entrepreneurship is becoming a major in college, as well as how some colleges consider it part of the business school and other colleges consider entrepreneurs from all areas, whether they're engineering majors or liberal arts majors. Anybody and everybody can get involved in entrepreneurship. But before we jump into that, we're going to hit Brad Recommends, where we're going to talk about building a budget as well as divorce planning. And of course, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege/114 or 114, as this is the 114th episode. All right, let's go ahead and jump into Brad Recommends.
The latest tips, tricks, and tools you can use today. This is Brad Recommends on Taming the High Cost of College.
All right, today on Brad Recommends, I want to talk about college budget as something that everybody needs to do as one of the 20 core areas of planning. Then the optional area would be divorce planning. Obviously, if you are divorced or may be divorced when college rolls around, you need to be concerned about it. However, if you're not going to be divorced, that just doesn't apply. All right, so let's talk a little bit about college budget. Everybody needs to build some sort of college budget. And the challenge for most families is they don't know where to start. So let's kind of start at the beginning. One way that you could start is to try and figure out about what it costs to go to your local state school. So you can do a little bit of research and see what your state school prices are, and that might be a place to start. But in the end, when you build a college budget, there's two ways you can go about it. You can say, well, I need to figure out how much money we're going to need, and I need to build a plan to get there. Or conversely, you can kind of build your budget the other way around and say, well, this is what I can afford for college, so this is what we're going to save and invest, and this is what we're going to do. And then we're going to base our school choice based on what we feel we can afford. Now, in reality, I think you're going to work it both ways in some cases, because in the end, just because you can only afford $50 a month doesn't mean that $50 a month is in any way an appropriate college budget. So then you may have to reconfigure how you calculate what you can afford. You may need to come up with additional income, or you may need to be willing to borrow large sums in order to cover the cost of college. So everybody needs to build a college budget, and I think you need to start as early as you reasonably can, so freshman, sophomore year if you can, and start getting a feel for what college actually costs, and then do some assumptions and kind of lay out some groundwork, So let's say hypothetically all in the state school is $20,000 and the student is going to borrow $5,000 and they're going to work for $4,000 over the school year, whether it's summers and breaks or whatever it might be. Mom and dad can contribute, another $5,000 from cash flow in that year. So how much do we need to save and invest in order to get where we need to go? But somehow you're going to need to come up with some preliminary numbers, and then maybe you look at the private schools as well and say, well, what would a budget look like if we stretched and we went to these more expensive schools? So again, college budget isn't necessarily easy, but it is necessary for all families to work on. And then I want to also talk about divorce. Okay, divorce is kind of as an optional area in that if you're not divorced, you don't need to worry about it. But if you are divorced, I guess it's less than optional. You're going to need to do it and really understand the situation. Now, divorce has impact in two areas. One is need-based aid. In other words, how need-based aid is calculated is determined as to whether you're single, if you're divorced, or if you are married. It has different impact there. And it also certainly has an impact on what I would call family politics. In other words, there's a issue floating around when it comes to paying for college, especially in a divorce situation, where perhaps two households are more expensive than one, and it's even harder to come up with the resources to help pay for college. So sometimes in the political side of things, I see situations where parents are very cooperative and they're working together to solve the college dilemma, and they're going to take advantage of whatever loopholes and rules that they can find. And in that case, divorce, you may have some opportunities around financial aid as an example. And of course, I've seen the other side of it where one person in the divorce is kind of holding the college bag. A lot of times I meet with a mom or dad that essentially says, I feel like I'm responsible for college. I don't think my ex-spouse is going to help, whether it's because they can't afford to or they don't want to. It just depends. But a lot of times I see that situation where one spouse is kind of holding the college bag because the other spouse is not going to participate. And then sometimes, like I said, you could be working together, in which case you might be able to leverage some planning strategies. And the big one in divorce would be need-based aid. So need-based aid is based on the income and the assets of the family. Now, in a divorce situation, sometimes that can be just one of the spouses. And if that spouse is remarried, so one of the divorced spouses, so one of the parents, I guess, technically, and if that parent is remarried, then they would include potentially the new spouse. So sometimes just mom or just dad are considered when it comes to financial aid. Now, I say sometimes because there are times when both mom and dad are considered, and not only are mom and dad considered, but all new spouses are considered as well. So it depends on the college that you're attending as far as what financial aid system you're going to need to work with. But in general, the FAFSA only cares about one parent, and the CSS profile uses both parents sometimes. So it gets a little complicated. So if you are divorced, you certainly need to dive into it and learn more about it. And I've got 2 great podcasts out there already, so I'm not going to go much deeper than that. But episode number 39, Divorced in College Planning, and I have a guest, an attorney, Sandy Durst. And episode 11, where I talk about college and divorce planning, where it's the solo show where I talk about the ins and outs of college planning and divorce. So again, if you're divorced, you need to learn more about it. If you're not, of course, you can move on. And then, of course, start working on your college budget and get a feel for that. All right, so that ends Brad Recommends. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview with Eric. All right, today I'm sitting down with Eric Liguori. He is the author of a book called The Startup Student. Welcome, Eric.
Hi, Brad. Thanks for having me.
So, before we jump into your book and other things, can you tell us a little bit about your journey and how you came to be doing what you do?
Absolutely. I spent a number of years working in corporate human resources, and as part of that journey, ended up doing HR outsourcing for small and medium-sized businesses in the Tampa area, and kind of got hooked on entrepreneurship and working with these companies to better build their businesses and service their needs from a human performance standpoint. And so went back, did a PhD at LSU in entrepreneurship, and I've been working with student entrepreneurs ever since. It's lots of fun.
All right. Well, let's start there then. What is a student entrepreneur?
Entrepreneurship is one of the fastest growing majors on college campuses around the country. Global Entrepreneurship Monitor thinks that there are roughly 135 million early stage entrepreneurs between 18 and 25 out there right now. And so we're seeing high schools, we're seeing middle schools, we're seeing even elementary schools start to offer more business programs, more creative problem solving courses, more of a focus on starting your own business and sort of controlling your own destiny to some extent. And so that's just trickling right on up to the college level and trickling right down from the college level. So I think basically any college campus you visit right now, you're going to see students that are starting and running their own businesses. And at most of those schools, you're also going to see a variety of opportunities and support systems in place to help them along that journey.
Right. So I guess when it comes to entrepreneurship, when people say that word entrepreneur, a lot of times the Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg comes to mind, which is, I don't need college. I'm going to go off and build my Goliath company. And I'm sure that's part of it, but can you explain a little bit more about what entrepreneurs might be doing and why it's now a college activity instead of a I don't need college kind of attitude?
Well, absolutely. I think that every situation is different, and certainly the word entrepreneur gets used a lot of different ways. We could very much be looking at kind of those high growth tech companies like the Bill Gates or the Steve Jobs that you mentioned, but we've got students that are doing significant revenue in small to medium sized businesses, in businesses that are in product development industries or that are in service functions. And I'm glad to tell you about any of those examples, but I think we do want to stay away from the idea that it's just, high tech, high growth, because what we're seeing is a lot of activity and a lot of revenue generation and some profit, and students doing everything from producing their own juices and bottling those and getting those distributed and sold to I have a student working at a nano brewery right now, students that are doing laser engraved lacrosse balls, or are doing things in the technology industry. And all of them are generating revenue and quasi supporting themselves as they move forward through school. It's pretty exciting.
All right. So I guess give us a couple of examples. You mentioned somebody is doing laser engraved lacrosse balls, which I guess, first of all, can you describe what a lacrosse ball actually looks like? Is that a hard ball or is it like a baseball?
Yeah, it's a hard ball. It's almost got like a tacky finish to it. They all tend to be, at least for men's, kind of a whitish color with a little bit of stick if you were to touch it with your fingers. And there's no, unlike a basketball that might have a logo on it, or a baseball that might have a team logo on it or would have stitching on it, it's pretty much smooth all the way around. And so the standard in lacrosse was to have this ball that was basically unbranded. And some of our students rejected the idea that all of them had to be unbranded. And so they used some laser technology to etch into the ball without changing the color or the ability to use the ball, logos for different teams, everything from just kind of rec leagues around the country to collegiate level teams. And so now they, in the first 4 months they were open, did, I want to say it was over $120,000 in revenue.
Wow.
And since then they're pushing north of I think $250,000.
Right. When you say they, you're talking about a group of students, a student, and his employees, or can you describe how does it work?
Absolutely. So this was a group of students on our lacrosse team here at the university, and they decided they wanted to go down this path. One student sort of led the way and controlled most of it, did most of the work, invested most of the capital, brought in most of the initial sales, and kind of took over the CEO function. And he had another partner, another lacrosse player that he was working with, and then they had hired some other staff. We actually lost one of our full-time employees in the center to these guys. They hired him away from us to go and run their warehouse as soon as they scaled up. And so, yeah, it was literally a group of lacrosse players that decided they wanted to go this route. They knew the industry, they knew the players at other schools, and they went and just started hustling sales, and it took off.
Wow. Okay. And these students are undergrads?
All undergrads. This whole group was a group of undergraduate students, one of whom is still the lead student, Nick, is still finishing up actually here at UT.
Okay. So this is something he started as maybe a sophomore, a junior? What?
Yeah, he started last fall at the beginning of his junior year, and he's a senior at present.
All right. Now, what kind of support or help, or is this like a class project? He had to write a business plan. He came up with the idea and then decided, well, now that I've got the business plan, I might as well go do it type of thing? Or can you explain that a little bit more about how being the entrepreneur student helped or provided support?
Absolutely. Yes and no. It was a class project of sorts, but not for Nick. So the lead guy had started this with some of the lacrosse players. I had one of the lacrosse players who was just working with him as an employee. take it on and take it through our Introduction to Entrepreneurship course as his project for the semester. He figured if he was doing it in real life, he might as well do it as part of his class project as well. And so the student who actually took it through as a class project wasn't involved in the ownership of the organization, but was one of their lead sort of sales guys that had started working with them. And so one thing you'll see when you look at any of these student ventures is the ownership structure and the division of labor is ever evolving. It really is a startup. And so people are in, people are out. They're still trying to figure things out. Sometimes that creates some challenges, but in other cases, it really just gives the startup some flexibility to grow.
Right. So I guess when you read the papers, you hear about, a lot of universities are trying to have incubators and startups and other things that are, how to take their research or take their intellectual capital and make businesses out of them. Is that kind of what's going on here as well?
Well, absolutely. I think you've got a lot of universities that approach this in two different ways. So you've got your traditional sort of incubation model, and that tends to lend itself to like faculty research coming out of, let's say, medicine or hard sciences, that they've got an idea for a new chemotherapy drug or a new medical device or a new prosthetic knee, and they want to slowly take that forward through the market and commercialize it. And so that's certainly something we're seeing on college campuses all around the country. But what I'm talking about here is actually a little bit different. It's not so much the tech to market from the research side of the university as it is undergraduate students and graduate students coming in and saying, I have an idea, I want to start a company, and going out and doing that. And so what we're seeing is universities not just have those incubator programs that support the tech to market side, but also have like accelerator programs that are just geared around bundling resources around students and helping them launch their own companies. And some schools have gone so far as to raise independent venture capital or angel investment funds in the millions of dollars to support efforts like this. And you see that at campuses all around the country.
All right. So now let's say I am a parent of a high school junior, sophomore, someone in that area. And now when we're talking about majors at dinner one day, my student says, I think I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like, okay. I think for most parents it would be, well, what does that mean? And where do we go from here?
I think it means as a parent, you're in for a lot of phone calls of ups and downs and trials and tribulations of a startup. But for the student, I think it means that they're in for a good journey. They should choose their college based on the resources that are available to support that. And you'll see across campuses around the country a variety of different sets of infrastructures in place. Babson University has entrepreneurship woven through basically every aspect of their campus and their program. The University of Tampa just launched a new entrepreneurship themed dorm and opened 25,000 square feet of dedicated space to support student entrepreneurs. The UC system out in California has, I want to say it's north of $100 million in investment capital available that students can apply for. Fresno State even launched a $300,000 fund just to support ideas coming out of students. And so I would say, if you were the parent, I would be looking and challenging my child to look at schools that have an infrastructure in place to help. And there's a lot of research and data available out there talking about entrepreneurship from Entrepreneur Magazine and Princeton Review and U.S. News and World Report ranking programs. Right.
Okay. So is entrepreneurship then a major, or is it a subset of business, or is it you study whatever you need to do and just, if you studied chemistry, then maybe your business would be around chemistry. And if you studied biology, it would be around biology. Or is that I'm going to go get an entrepreneurship major?
Well, yes, so absolutely. So it's one of the fastest growing majors on college campuses. The exact makeup of what's entailed in that major does vary a little bit from school to school. So, for example, Florida State last year announced a $100 million gift to create the largest interdisciplinary school of entrepreneurship education in the nation. They are maintaining an entrepreneurship major in their management department in their business school, highly ranked business school, top research university. But they're also launching this interdisciplinary school of entrepreneurship that's standalone, that spans entrepreneurs in residence as faculty from all the different colleges across campus, and we'll bring in students from all different majors around campus. And so I think what you start to see is that some campuses are much more focused on interdisciplinary entrepreneurship education, which doesn't always lend itself to a major, but in some cases it does. And other campuses are focusing on entrepreneurship as its own discipline and as its own major. And I don't know that there's a right or a wrong. I think the context really depends on the student and what they're looking for and what they're trying to accomplish.
Right. Okay. So is there, I guess, as I think about it, if you were an entrepreneur major, again, I think a lot of people are assuming that you're the guy with the great idea and you're going to go launch a business. But I think there's, for a lot of people out there, there's a second guy in command or a third person, and that isn't necessarily the ultra dynamic person, but someone that gets in there and gets the work done type of thing. And I think you think of Steve Jobs and you think of, and I can't remember, Wozniak, I think was the engineer's name, that, Steve had the vision and he had the drive, but Wozniak had the smarts and actually had to deliver whatever Steve dreamed up.
Absolutely. And so when I think of how we approach our program here at UT, when we get to our capstone entrepreneurship class, the final, series of courses they're going to take when they're going to go and graduate with this degree, we give them the option of working on their own idea and working solo or working in a team. And these are all majors. These are all students who are declaring entrepreneurship as a major and are, 4 to 6 or 7 months out from actually graduating with a degree in business, in entrepreneurship specifically. And they decide, do they want to work with some of their other classmates or with people in the community or other business partners on their own idea? Do they want to join a team as part of someone else's idea? There's a lot of data that suggests it could be 4 to 6 years from when a student finishes their business degree until when they would go and be able to launch what most people would consider a viable venture. And so there's certainly the case to be made that it's going to take them a little bit of time upon graduation to work, to get some experience, to learn an industry, to learn how to talk to people and how to interact in a professional setting, to save up some money, and to just sort of adult, for lack of a better phrase. And that's a very valid path. And we see a lot of students kind of go that way. But we also see students go the other direction. They're all in. They're saying they're 20, they're 21 years old. They've got very little to risk. They might as well go and dive all into their idea now. And they go and they launch and they hustle and they bootstrap money from a variety of sources. And sometimes that's, investments from family. Sometimes that's credit card debt. Sometimes, and ideally, they're going out and they're getting pre-sales and they're generating revenue and they're just sort of leveraging that revenue over and over again and reinvesting it in the company. And so we see students doing a lot of different things, but I don't know that there's a right or a wrong. I think sometimes the students do work in teams and sometimes they're the best COO out there, but they're not the visionary. And that's perfectly fine. And the same thing, sometimes the students are the idea person and they really need that person to help them out.
Right. So I'm a business owner, and I'm sure there's many business owners that are listening. And I think part of the business ownership issues that a lot of small businesses run into is, yes, you might have that great idea and you've got a product to deliver, whatever it might be. But then all the other things around running a business, like, maintaining your books and paying your taxes and your licenses and renting real estate or buying real estate, if that's the type of business you're in, or, setting up a retail or hiring employees or managing HR and all, most people that are entrepreneurs didn't say, I can't wait to hire employees so I can deal with HR. That's probably pretty low on their list. But is that the type of stuff that you learn while in college, where a typical person, like a Steve Jobs who didn't go to college, I don't know how he learned how to manage people other than trial and error?
Absolutely. So there's, everybody learns a little bit differently. When we think about entrepreneurship education and what we do at the college level, we tend to think in sort of 3 buckets, right? We've got our business basics bucket, which is, the setting up the books, the hiring of staff, the entity creation, the cash flow management, the pricing and product and advertising side of things, the cost analysis, the intellectual property protection, right? All the basics to just doing business. Then we've got sort of the entrepreneurship basics, and these are different types of entrepreneurship and characteristics of entrepreneurs and understanding the entrepreneurial process and the nature of an opportunity, and understanding some of the taxonomies and infrastructure out there that's in place. Knowing how to start and launch lean. What is entrepreneur orientation, and how do we position our companies to do that? And seed and venture capital. That's the entrepreneurship bucket, right? So we've got a business core, business foundation that we expect students to go through. We've got an entrepreneurship core, but then we've got all of the soft skills, and this is probably the bulk of the focus by the time students get into the classes in their major, and it's the mindset and the competencies it takes to be an entrepreneur. So we presume that through the business courses in the core and the way business schools operate, they get a good chunk of those business basics, and that when we get them to the mindset and the competencies, things like opportunity alertness or passion or persistence and tenacity, guerrilla behavior, learning from failure, resilience, creative problem solving, building and using networks, that they start to connect the dots on some of these. Now, there's a certain level of abstractness that comes into play. A student that goes and takes an introduction to human resource class as part of getting a business degree, you're right, doesn't necessarily always walk away and say, I know exactly how to set up my employee handbook and I know how to go out and hire a staff member. But they should walk away understanding what the laws are, knowing what they know and what they don't know, and knowing where to go to find the resources and the help that they need. And so centers then kind of fill the gap between the formal education and everything else. And so that's what we're seeing is in these incubator and accelerator programs, the ability to partner them with mentors, to let them learn from our failures and our experiences, to get them the guidance they need to navigate sort of that choppy water of uncertainty at the beginning.
Right. All right. So I guess there's parents out there that are thinking about entrepreneurship now, and they're saying, gee, this seems like a good fit for my student. And I guess that would be kind of that question is, how do you know if entrepreneurship is right? Is there particular traits that a typical student has? Again, as an example, there's students out there that, have been mowing lawns since they were 12, and then they moved to this, and now they sold apps, they did this, they were always kind of trying to figure out how to make a buck, so to speak.
I think that we see a lot of students that come into the program and they fall into typically one of two categories, right? Either they look and sound exactly like you just described. They've been hustling since day one. They were the one that had the lemonade stand that loved the idea of making lemonade for 25 cents and selling it for $1, that then went and started selling their graphic design services in high school to local small businesses, or set up their own company. I saw a kid who was selling these really cool, like, wine crate things he was making out of wood out in California in high school, and I think he did like $16,000 in revenue in a semester's time. So you definitely have the students who have been out there kind of doing this, hustling a little bit and going that direction, or launching their own tech company or building their own app and saying this is the path they want. But then we also have the kids who say, I really like the idea of entrepreneurship. I like the idea of starting something or creating something, but I don't know how to do it, or I haven't taken any action in that regard. And really, with both sets of these students, we focus on moving the needle. We focus on getting them to think more systemically about their business and how it works and how to scale it and how to grow it. And so we focus on the tools of business and scalability and growth, with the idea being that if this is really the path they want to go down, they need to figure out how they can get it to a point where it justifies the opportunity cost of not going and taking a job somewhere else. Because we presume that any of our students that graduate with a business degree can go out and command a pretty decent market wage. And so if they're not going to take the market up on that wage, then they need to have some reason for doing that, and some way that they can show that their numbers make sense and they're generating some revenue, or will be. So when we think about this in context, we think about how do we move the needle? How do we get the students to think more strategically and with a slant towards growth?
Right. So what kind of barriers do students run into? I guess, the first one I think of is, a 20-year-old out there trying to build a business may have a tough time, being taken seriously by, other businesses and financing companies, et cetera, et cetera. So what else do they run into?
Absolutely. So on the credibility front, right? Because you're right, a 20-year-old going out there and saying, I need to raise $100,000 or will you buy my product, does face some credibility challenges. And so one of the things we'll do through the center is we'll partner them with mentors. And what I can tell you is that our mentor network here is pretty robust. We've got 24 entrepreneurs in residence. They take 100% of our students seriously. They're 100% candid with those students when they like something, they don't like something, but they take them seriously. And they're willing to, if they like the idea and the student's willing to work hard and listen and is open to feedback. And, we do spend a lot of time coaching students to be open to feedback. They can go and they can find a partner who will make some introductions for them. We'll let them borrow some of their credibility. So credibility is definitely a barrier, but there are ways to overcome that. Access to capital is another one. Most 20-year-olds don't have, the $5,000, let alone the $50 or the $100 or the $200,000 to go and invest in some of the ideas that they have. And so figuring out how to overcome that hurdle becomes another challenge, but that's also a challenge that universities are starting to become better equipped to help them manage. One thing we talk about in class is, if you need to raise that $200,000 and you know that you want to do it over the next 5 years, you need to have a plan in place. So you need $200,000 to open a restaurant. You're fighting the credibility thing. You probably need to go and get some experience in the restaurant industry. You probably need to get some management experience in some industry, because at least management experience is portable. You need to start saving up some money. You need to go and get a credit card. You need to build up some credit history. You need to be someone who a bank is just willing to lend money to, and you need to save up enough to come up with your share of it. So we talk about having that plan in place and how do we overcome that hurdle. We also, though, like I mentioned earlier, see universities starting to put into place funding mechanisms for students where they can go and they can fund their business by pitching to a group of investors and potentially landing some support there. And that's all through the university network or the university foundation. We also see students bootstrapping this through competitions. And we've had students raise $150,000+ in the last 2 years. Just by winning competitions and going out and pitching their business that way. And that's a great opportunity because they not only learn how to sell to a variety of different audiences, but they bring in cash flow. They bring in capital. I think it's not cash flow. They bring in capital at zero equity because they go and they win a competition. It's prize money. They're not having to give up equity to go down that path. And so a lot of different hurdles, but I think what we're seeing is a lot of entrepreneurship programs doing a really good job and much better than ever before of recognizing them and helping students overcome them.
All right. So what would you say to a student or parent? I think there might be a dynamic or a challenge. And I see this entrepreneurship could be like some of the other majors out there where, I think of like musician, right? You could be a starving artist for the rest of your life, or you could be a rock star or somewhere in between. But a lot of parents would say, why don't you get something that is training for the job, the engineering or nursing or business? And I think entrepreneurship might fall in that category where parents are a little afraid of it because they don't understand it.
Absolutely. So I think that there's definitely something to be said for learning a skill. I'm personally a big fan of that. I think, if you are of the mindset that you can get a degree in engineering, you should get a degree in engineering. And there's going to be lots of opportunities on most campuses with good engineering programs for entrepreneurship. You see schools like Rowan University that actually has an engineering entrepreneurship undergraduate major, for example. So there's definitely something to be said for that. My experience has been the students who are truly passionate about it find the resources out there. I had a student, Laura, and she was an art major, photography. She came in, she asked for permission to take my upper division business class at Fresno State when I was there. And I said, yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's an upper division class in the College of Business. All the other students in here have been through, their finance and their accounting and their economics and their marketing and their management prereqs, and she hadn't. But she was passionate about it. She was set. She swore she could do the work. And so we let her sit in the class. We let her take the class. She did like $40,000 in revenue in 4 months' time as an art major. She ran circles around all of the business students. And so I think that the students that are really passionate about their idea and go and they focus on their skill, there's still a plethora of resources. Laura took advantage of the the incubator on campus. She took advantage of some of the funding mechanisms that were on campus. She took advantage of the entrepreneurship mentor program that we had. And so I think that what we're seeing is you've got entrepreneurship as a major, but you have entrepreneurship centers that are interdisciplinary and that are co-curricular, that build infrastructure around helping those students that are majoring in something else and wanting to still have an entrepreneurial path. And so seek out those resources.
All right. So it sounds like there's a couple different paths then. So one is you could go get whatever major you were going to get originally and just plan on being an entrepreneur with said major, which then leads me to, is entrepreneurship a possibility as a minor at some schools or your school, or what's your experience
Absolutely.
there?
So I think every school just has it structured a little bit differently. Some schools have it as a part of every major. Some schools have it as its own major. Some schools have it as a minor. Some schools have it as a certificate program. And some schools just have centers that provide co-curricular options like student clubs, mentor networks, and venture finance funds. And so I think every university is going to be a little bit different, and that's probably a good thing. Every university has different resources. Every university has a different student population, and so they're going to do what they think is best for their given set of students. I can tell you, having been at Fresno State, the students that we had there and the needs of that community and the resources that were available to us lent us to have a major, a minor, and a certificate program and a center that serviced the community as well as the campus. Here at the University of Tampa, our student population is very different. We've got heavy investments in incubation and acceleration programs, and our students work through those. We've got systematized majors, and we've got some graduate programs because we have a demand at the graduate level for entrepreneurship education. And so I think each campus that you look at is going to be a little bit different. But ultimately, that difference is a good thing because it probably means that they're doing so for some reason that aligns with how everything else works in sort of their environment.
Right. So I guess that leads me to the point I want to make, which it sounds like if entrepreneurship is something that you have interest in and you kind of have to decide, is that going to be your major, your minor? It's just going to be something you participate in extracurricularly, and then you need to dig into it at each campus. Do you know of any resources that might have information, or is it really you got to just go to each college, ask the questions, do the visit, talk to the entrepreneur area, and learn? How would you go about that? If you're a junior saying, I'm interested in entrepreneurship, now I got to go find the college that's right for me, what resources are you aware of, and or what questions would we ask, or how do we do that?
Sure. So a couple of places I would say to start. One, if you're looking at major state universities in your area, I'm going to bet that they have entrepreneurship centers. And so I would be sending very nice emails out to the directors of those centers and to the faculty in their entrepreneurship and their management programs. Management tends to be the department that entrepreneurship is housed in, to touch base and to pick their brains and to ask them about their programs. If you are emailing and you're doing it in a polite and professional manner, these people in entrepreneurship centers around the country and the faculty that are teaching entrepreneurship, and you're not getting a response, you should read into that as a sign. My experience has been that entrepreneurship faculty and entrepreneurship center staff are very, very responsive. And so I would say, that's a good starting point if you've got a specific school in mind. If you're wanting to know, though, what schools really do this and really do it well, there are several places you can look. The U.S. Association for Small Business and Entrepreneurship is the largest sort of academic entrepreneurship association out there. I'm on their board of directors, and we award one program a year, sort of the National Model Program Award. For 2017, it's San Diego State University, and Alex DeNoble, that runs the program there, has done a fantastic job over the better part of 3 decades of building up a very comprehensive network of curricular and co-curricular programming for students, and his students do some amazing things. For 2016, it was the University of Tampa. And so you can go on our website, usasbe.org, and go to our awards page, and you can see the past award winners for model programs, specialty programs, undergraduate programs, graduate programs, and learn a little bit more about those programs. You can reach out to any of our officers or our executive director, Patrick Snyder, with any questions. And Patrick, I'm sure, will be glad to make introductions to anyone in our network, if you've got a student looking and is interested in entrepreneurship. You can also look at the U.S. News and World Report rankings for undergraduate and graduate programs, and the same with the Princeton Review and Entrepreneur Magazine rankings. They tell you about some of the programs that are out there that are the most prominent ones in the country for undergraduate entrepreneurship education, and in some cases for graduate entrepreneurship education. And so if you're looking more nationally at who's the best of the best, I would be looking at those programs. If you're looking more regionally, I'd be looking at your larger state schools as a starting point, and then I wouldn't be afraid to just pick up the phone and call the admissions office at any other university that you were interested in and ask about the program availability that's there.
So I guess 2 quick questions then. It sounds
Sure.
like universities and colleges are marketing this, so they would probably have some sort of literature, brochure, website, other places where you could at least get the preliminary information for their various programs. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then how competitive are these programs? I guess that's the next thing is I know, and again, going to like the medical field, obviously there's only so many spots for, say, a nursing student at a school. They take 120 students, and when they're done, they're done. They can't take 127 this year because they had good applicants. They only have room for 120. I mean, is there a competitive landscape on the entrepreneurship where it's a sought after major?
Certainly that would vary by campus, right? But what I would say is my experience has been that you're looking at that from the perspective of how competitive is it for my student to get into that business school. The major itself tends to be much less of a gateway. And so business schools will typically have minimum standards for acceptance, and they might only accept a certain number of students or students with a certain GPA or a certain GPA within their business core. But I would look at it from the business school perspective. I haven't seen too many entrepreneurship majors, the majority of which housed in business, that have their own requirements in addition to it. Certainly getting into some of the elite programs, there's a competitive nature to get into the university, to get into the program. An example would be, it's not going to be any easier or harder to get in the entrepreneurship program at Princeton as it is any other program at Princeton, right? Or at Yale as it is any other program at Yale, I wouldn't think. But by and large, for someone who's looking to go and major in entrepreneurship, there's no shortage of programs out there, and there's no shortage of good programs out there that a lot of people could get into. One thing I'll just note, entrepreneurship's its own beast. And sometimes the students that do the best in our programs don't necessarily always do the best in their classes. Sometimes students are more passionate about their idea and building their business than they are about acing their accounting exam. And I'm not saying that that's good nor bad. I think there's certainly a need for them to do well in their academic programs. But we see a lot of students who they're going to get through. They're not going to be 4.0 students. They're spending too much time growing their businesses. Their passion is somewhere else. They don't necessarily care about macro or microeconomics at this point in time or at this point in their lives. And that's going to always be second fiddle to the business they're starting. And so I think in entrepreneurship, especially, a focus on having that 4.0 grade isn't always the main factor, and certainly not something that I would argue we can prove is a determinant of success.
Right. Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate all the great information you provided. And if people want to learn more, I know you've got a book out there, and we mentioned it at the top of the show. Can you tell us more about the book and what it's about?
Absolutely. So there was a need. We realized that a lot of our students come into these programs, and by the time we really get them in their upper division business classes, they're finishing up their second semester, their junior year, they're going into their senior year, and they're kind of hitting themselves in the head saying, oh my gosh, there's all these resources available to me, and I'm 2.5 years in, and I'm just now learning about them, and I don't have enough time to use them all. And so I got together with 22 other leading sort of entrepreneurs, faculty, experts, and students themselves who've been there, done this, and launched their own companies, and put together this book called The Startup Student. It's thestartupstudent.co for more information. And basically the whole idea is it is a practical guide to how to get the most out of your entrepreneurship program at your university. And we talk about taking advantage of all of the programs and services that are available to you, tips and tricks written by student entrepreneurs themselves who've gone out and had some success or some failure, written by people running some of the leading programs out there. And so the whole idea was to get this in the hands of the high school seniors, the college freshmen that are thinking this might be a path they want to go down, so that they know kind of what they need to do to get the most out of the entire 4 years versus waiting until they stumble into their first core entrepreneurship class as a, second semester junior.
Right, absolutely. So this would be appropriate for high school students and their parents to be reading.
Absolutely. We sent it out actually to a large group of high school students last spring, and we'll probably do that again this spring.
All right. Any other ways that people can get a hold of you, or you want to put anything else out there as far as more information?
Sure. It's the startupstudent.co, the website for the book. I'm available at Eric Liguori, Liguori, @gmail.com. And I'll just throw out a quick plug for the Collegiate Entrepreneurs Organization. It's the leading organization for student entrepreneurship. It's essentially the student entrepreneurship fraternity or club system. It's c-e-o.org, housed here at the University of Tampa with chapters on over 400 campuses around the globe.
Great. All right. So I will put links in the show notes for all the websites that we referenced in this program. So go ahead and send those to me, and I'll get them out there and make sure everybody has access to them. And I really do appreciate all the great information, and we'll stay in touch.
Great. Thanks so much, Brad, for your time, and good luck.
Thank you. All right. That was a great interview with Eric. Hopefully you learned a ton. Before I let you go, I just wanted to briefly mention that I have courses available now at the website. If you go to Taming the High Cost of College, there's a button called Courses. And the first course we put out there is a free course it's the Scholarship Guide for Busy Parents. So you're able to learn more about scholarships, and then ultimately determine whether or not scholarships are right for you. And then from there, you can pursue scholarships or not. But it helps parents very quickly get up to speed as to whether or not scholarships is something that would be appropriate for their situation. So if you think you might have interest in scholarships, go ahead and go check it out. There's no cost. Just put in your email address, create your account with a password, and you can access that for free. All right, that's all that we have. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.